Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swagglehos. And in this one, we got ourselves an update for the comic book index for the month of May. A little bit behind on this video, but don't worry, this is going to be a good version of this one today because we're going to ask ourselves the question, has the comic book market bottomed? While I don't actually know the answer, we can take a look at the numbers and get a sense if that is actually the case in this video here today. But of course, before I get into it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I'd appreciate it. Helps support the channel doing those things. But let us get into this index update for the month of May. Now, what is the comic book index? Really quick, it is the top 100 sold books per age. I look at silver, bronze, and copper. I take the highest volume of grade. That's the one I count for those books. I take the final sale of the month, aka the market close, and I get all of this info from GPA data. So suffice to say, if I was going to focus in and want to buy the top 100 most in-demand, most bought and sold comic books within each age, how much would it cost me on a month-by-month basis? Well, for the Silver Age last month, it would have cost you $45,896, a much higher number than that of what we've been getting for those books, within the last 7 months or so. We had a really big up month from the previous month in March, where we had been on the decline for a couple months in a row. So where did we go in the month of May? Well, we did go on a little bit of a decline once again, down to the $43,685 level. But, if you really take a step back and look at these numbers, in the last sort of 7 to 8 months or so, all we're sort of seeing is higher lows, which is usually a good indication that the, comic books or the market has sort of turned the corner. And while this is just one form of data and it's not a perfect system and it's a very specific way how to measure the comic book market, it does sort of feel like, all of the, drops that we've been feeling, over the course of these last 3 years have really started to kind of settle in. It kind of feels like, we've been going sideways. Certainly there's going to be months that are up, and then there's going to be more months, I'm sure, in the future that are going to be down. But generally speaking, we are still elevated above that of the numbers which we were seeing, in mid to late 2020. So the theory has sort of been, for these last 3 years, ever since we got the COVID boom and the comic book boom inflate in 2021, we kind of had to see that money kind of hemorrhage out of the values. And where we kind of sit today, just based on the natural rate of inflation, these values are going to be hovering above the, what we were seeing in 2020. And so the question had always been, like, will we be going below those numbers, in 2019 and 2018? And as it sort of sits today in terms of the Silver Age, for when you look at it, it seems like we are in a pretty decent spot. Like maybe we're not going to go, another 50% down. Or maybe we will. But let me know what you guys think in the comments, and let's move forward to the Bronze Age. Now, last month for the Bronze Age, we were at 35,816. The Bronze Age had actually seen 2 up months in a row, which was a very rare occurrence. I think that had only happened, maybe 1 or 2 other times, in this previous 3-year period. Well, where did we go here in the month of May? Well, we also did go down, much like Silver Age, down to the $33,985 level. But again, it comes with a little bit of a caveat. That is a higher low than what we've seen in terms of the lows, from the last 6 months or so. So if you're an optimist, you could think of that as a sign that we're kind of on our way back upwards, from that of where we were at the bottom, kind of in the December time. So, it's sort of hard to tell, where we might be going from here. But again, much like the Silver Age, it does sort of feel like the Bronze Age is kind of staying above that 2020 price, generally speaking. And, all the values have sort of been held up by, sort of the organic demand that still exists within comic books, even with all of the churn and the turnover from the comic book boom of 2021. Well, let's kind of round it out here and talk about the Copper Age before we get into the nitty-gritty and talk about some of the interesting little details that I saw in the numbers. Well, here in the Copper Age, last month we were at 23,300, which was, again, kind of a push from the previous month, a little bit down, but generally around the same price. Well, where do we go in the month of May? And surprisingly, we actually went a little bit up for the Copper Age, now at the $23,463 level. Again, another little bit of a push, although technically it is a little bit higher. And this one was particularly interesting because, there were a few books in there that I think got the inflate from, say, X-Men 97. Just to name one book off the top of my head, like X Factor #6, the first appearance Apocalypse, like that book really took a jump. And so there were books in there that got excited by speculation. And that's probably one of the reasons why this month was so positive for the Copper Age in comparison to the prior months. And there you see them side by side here in the month of May. It's interesting, while all these ages sort of have their own journeys in different months, on an individual basis, it does sort of feel like, generally speaking, the comic book market follows itself, whether it's Silver Age or Bronze Age or Modern Age or whatever you want to call it, they're all kind of, going along with each other, generally speaking. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, a high tide raises all ships. If people are into comics, they're into comics, and, they kind of dip their toes into all of the ages overall. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. Let me get into the key takeaways here. I'll go through this really quick, because I don't want to be too dense for you guys, but I do want to just show you the numbers in case there's, a couple of people out there that are very interested in this stuff. But for the Silver Age in April, 45,896 down to 43,685. That's a decrease of 5%. Bronze Age, 35,816 down to 33,985. Also a decrease of 5%. And May Copper Age, 23,463. That is a push. Here in the key takeaways, silver book values 12% down, 10% up, 27% non-sale. That is very, very similar to what we've been seeing for the last couple months or so. I mean, obviously the numbers change, from month to month, where, maybe it's 13% down and then 12% up, or whatever the case. Maybe it's flips, but that's kind of what we've been seeing. Similar downs and similar ups, and then really, the non-sale factor that can be a big indicator of sort of the demand out there and how the numbers change on a month-by-month basis. Similar with the bronze book values, 13% down, 15% up, 8% non-sale, pretty consistent for what bronze usually shows. Now let's take a look at the month-by-month here in the Silver Age, and you can focus in on the purple line. That is the current calendar year. There in May, we are actually kissing the yellow line, which was the May month for 2020. Now, I've kind of made mention in the past that usually April and May are up months for comic books due to the fact that, usually there's a tentpole movie that comes out around that time. In prior years, we've seen, Endgame come out. We've seen the Doctor Strange movie come out. We've seen stuff like that, and usually that creates a lot of speculation and people buying up comic books. I think this year has been a little bit different because we know that the MCU has not been as exciting. In fact, we haven't really even been getting that many MCU movies. We are going to be getting Deadpool, which is an interesting one to see how that has an effect on the comic book market, if in fact it does have an effect on the comic book market. But generally speaking, as far as the purple line touching the yellow line, I think that that's a really good sign, because in the 2018 and 2019 years, that is normally the case. Like, some of these lines will actually touch each other, they'll flirt with each other. You have to retest some of the values you had in the prior years before the values actually end up going up. And so I think that, with the purple line, sort of touching the yellow line, it feels like, yeah, this is basically what the chart should have looked like in 2021 if we didn't have the comic book boom. This feels more quote unquote normal as to how the market is behaving. So it does kind of make you think, have we sort of hit this bottom? I mean, as far as these numbers are concerned, as far as, how this index is calculated, which again, like I said at the beginning of the video, is just one point of data. It's not a perfect system. It just evaluates, graded sales for key comic books that are, in demand, that are fairly common and of median value. For these particular books, it does sort of feel like, yeah, maybe we're at that point. And certainly things could go lower. Certainly, there could be less and less people buying comic books. And that could certainly be the case, even in the future, outside of the current state of the economy. I mean, one day people are not going to want to collect comic books anymore, I assume, right? I mean, even if that's 500 years from now. But when we're all living in meta, I mean, is anyone going to want to have old expensive paper? I mean, who really knows? But at least for now, for the short term, for where we are, it does sort of feel like, yeah, maybe this is where we're going to be, unless of course, we hit, some kind of black swan event, or, everything goes to zero, or the economy crashes. And at that point, it really just becomes on like what your sort of outlook is on comic books and the market and the MCU or the DCU, or however you feel about all the movies. If you're a bear, basically everything is going to zero. If you're a bull, then, now's a great time to buy, right? Like, everything is a great time to buy. Everything's going to go up by 10x. Just you wait. But generally speaking, I'm a little bit more optimistic. I don't know about you guys. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but in the handful of comic book shows that I've been going to this year, I feel like attendance is really high. And I think that, sure, most people are, still buying raw books over graded books, and all the calculations that I'm showing you guys in this video are all weighted towards graded comic books. So maybe the graded values will continue to go down a little bit, but the demand is still there. I think the sentiment in the culture is a little bit more positive than what it was, even last year. I think, like, even in current comic book publishing, there were not many titles that were selling at all. I mean, this year isn't too much better, generally speaking, but at least we've had, videos like, covering the Blood Hunt cover, the Crime 22 homage. We've talked about the Doctor Doom book that people are very, very excited about. So, it does feel like people are generally more positive towards the comic book collecting market. And I do think that as we approach the summer months, we're really getting into the con season. I think that, people are going to be energized and excited over San Diego Comic-Con. I have to imagine that there's going to be, Marvel doing their panel, and I could see that generating a lot of excitement. I mean, maybe we're going to get a Superman trailer. Maybe James Gunn is going to be, at San Diego Comic-Con showing some footage of his universe. I mean, you have to sort of think that, there are positive indications that, we have sort of, maybe hit this bottom. Maybe things are starting to turn around. Or maybe that's all just cope. And once again, it depends on your outlook. Because if everyone thinks that the inflation is still really high and, the entire economy is going to collapse, then certainly people are not going to have money for comic books. I mean, can't sleep in a comic book, can't eat a comic book. Or maybe you can. But that is all for this video. That was the update for the comic book index for the month of May. What do you guys think about this? How do you guys feel about, seeing these numbers? What's your sense out there, whether you're a dealer or a buyer or a collector or whatever you do in the market? Do you feel like we're kind of at the bottom, generally speaking? I mean, when I say we're sort of at the bottom, or I'm asking the question, are we at the bottom? Like, sure, values could continue to go down a little bit, but it does sort of feel like those big drops have already kind of occurred. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys found this video useful and helpful. That's all I got. Like, comment, subscribe. See y'all in the next video.